Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first in our series of webinars on managing for success. This week's episode is on communication skills with Sarah Charlton and James Wright from DG Legal. For those of you who haven't joined our webinars before, my name is Sammy. I'm the Business Development Assistant at DG Legal. The slides from today's presentation will be sent over tomorrow, and a recording of the webinar will be made available. So if we do run over and you need to leave, you will be able to watch the rest at another time. So we are in webinar mode, so we can't see or hear any of you. So please use the Q&A function for our speakers to answer your questions. To introduce Sarah and James, Sarah has an honours degree in applied accounting and is a fellow member of the Association of Chartered and Certified Accountants. Her career spans over 30 years working within the legal sector, fulfilling roles from practice manager through to COFA. And James's career in legal finance spans over 25 years, working in medium to large law firms, managing their legal finance functions. His knowledge and experience in understanding the SRA accounts rules has enabled him to provide extensive support to COFA and build processes and procedures to enable compliance. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Sammy. We're really pleased to be here today and to share some knowledge and skill that James and I have picked up over the last few decades. I just want to sort of put a little bit of a caveat with being able to do a Zoom conference training session. I'm not expecting any parcels. I'm not expecting any stray animals, any children or any other distractions, other than I do have a black cat. I have petted it heavily before today's session, so I am hoping that she's not going to show walking past the screen, but I do apologize in advance if any of the above or all of the above may happen. So thank you very much. So welcome to this whirlwind tour into being a good communicator that sits in the backdrop of a modern world. The training will last no more than 20-25 minutes to provide you time at the end to answer any questions that you might have from today's session. So we all start the day with the intention of being good communicators, but there are often unknown factors which derail us from achieving this. Lack of time being the most obvious one. We often know what the right method of communication would be, but instead we choose the easy option to save time. These decisions can be counterproductive as more time has to be spent further down the line in resolving a task that might not have been completed correctly as the message was unclear, or resolving a behavioural issue that has arisen due to a poor choice in the method of communication. For those of you who already feel that you are good communicators, then I would hope this 30-minute session allows you to press the reset button to remove those bad habits that I have no doubt will have crept in over the years. For those of you who are relatively new to the topic, then I hope it will actually express a newfound interest in the importance of communication. However, we are going to focus on some key areas. So let's just move on with the very first slide. So who do we communicate with? Clients, employees, business owners, suppliers, other stakeholders, and obviously the community at wide. How much time and effort you put into each of these will depend on the power and influence that they have over your business. However, today's session will largely focus on the relationship between a manager and their team. So let's move on to the types of communication. So there are 4 methods of communication. Firstly, we have verbal, and this has been adapted in recent years to use voice notes, Zoom calls, to plug the gap that hybrid working has created. Secondly, we have non-verbal, which may be a difficult type of communication to interpret, depending on your level of emotional intelligence. It can also be difficult to hide your own body language where this isn't tying up with the message that you are giving. So if your words are sort of saying, yeah, I'm fine with this, but your body language is very closed, it's very clear that you're not particularly happy with the message that you're having to give, and there is a disconnect between the two. So it's really important that you try to tie the two up. When we talk about verbal, we talk about active listening, your pitch, your tone. And when we talk about non-verbal, it's the detail around your posture, your gestures, and your eye contact. There's a lot that can be read into your body language. So thirdly, we have visual. And I will be honest, I'm not sure I ever thought I'd see a day where I'd see emojis widely used in the legal profession in internal exchanges of emails, but hey, we're here today. And emojis are often used to express pleasure or displeasure in a particular communication. However, jokes aside, the use of visual communication is a great mechanism. It's a great opportunity for you to be able to share a message where you might have a business that speak multiple languages. Also, if you have mixture of learning styles, you tend to find that lawyers are thinkers, and the way that they learn or absorb something might be more written communication, so they can read it, take it away, absorb it overnight, and then maybe respond the following day. However, if you have a creative department that does marketing, or if you've got an IT department or an accounts department, they have a different way of learning or absorbing a particular message because of the way that they, the way that their brain works. Finally, we have written communication. This is widely used, and it allows you to obviously review and control what is said from your perspective. But in recent times, we've seen a shift away from emails and the use of instant chat features that provide, they generally tend to sort of indicate whether you're online or whether you have read the message. With that, it can often place pressure, undue pressure on the recipient to provide an immediate response. Whether that's you as the manager sending an email to a member of staff to say, hey, I'd like to catch up tomorrow, I've got a difficult conversation to have with you. Or alternatively, if that's a member of the team saying, can I have tomorrow off because I've got childcare issues. So there is that possibility that you're going to respond immediately. So one of the things I do hope you take away from today's session is the sort of freedom to be able to make sure that you can take a step back and give yourself that breathing space before you respond, despite you being aware that they might have seen that you're online and they may be aware that you've read that message. It doesn't mean that you have to immediately respond. We're going to look at two specific areas at the moment. First, we're going to look at active listening, and that's largely because it's overlooked. Communication is often perceived as something that's one way rather than it being a two-way medium. And secondly, we're going to have a look at the sort of written communication style. Again, there's a misconception that perhaps that's an easy option because you're able to control the message and the direction of travel that communication is going to have. So James is going to go through a couple of slides just to highlight some of the pitfalls or the considerations that might need to be considered. So looking at written communication, and like I said, we're talking instant chats, group chats, we're talking emails, we're talking letters, everything. The risk of failure with written communication largely stems through a couple of different reasons. The recipient is less likely to ask questions, and if they're unsure about the instruction compared to verbally. So if someone's in front of you and you're relaying a piece of instruction, they're more likely to sort of say there and then, actually, I'm not sure what you're talking about, or I don't have that login anymore. People tend to go for the shortest route and, giving you feedback or responding to say, I don't have this or I don't have that. They're less likely to do it because it requires time and effort. You also have the reluctance to ask questions because they might be shy, they might be new, lack of interest, fear of failure, and so forth. So when you're selecting the method, the style of communication, you should be thinking of all these things when you are actually communicating to people. So the message often relies on you including, full instructions with no assumptions made. So clear communication is really important to get that successful outcome of the task being completed correctly as instructed. Most messages do miss key information, and this is further enhanced if there is familiarity with the person that you're communicating with. So if you are relying on assumptions, make sure you take the time to cover these off. So say, I assume you still have your login. I assume you still have that piece of equipment. I assume you still have your notes from last time. It also provides good practice For those of you who've been doing communication for a long time, like myself, it's an easy trap to fall into, to start shortcutting because of the familiarity. So if you can adopt that good practice, no matter who you're communicating to, that you acknowledge that you've considered this particular aspect of the task, and you have made that assumption that they already know how to do this aspect of it, then obviously that starts to reinforce good practices. And it also allows other people to learn from the way that you communicate. We also find that there's less chance of receiving a response, if you are emailing or sending a message. So obviously the engagement is going to be one way opposed to two ways, and there's a number of flaws to that. So from a manager's perspective, I know the temptation is so easy. You can write an email out of hours. You can spend ages thinking and planning what you're going to say. And if you don't get a response, I mean, that task has only been a 2-minute task, rather than if you'd have done it verbally and they'd ask questions, it's become a 10-minute conversation. So I absolutely can see why it's attractive to send an email, and I don't want to say discourage any response, but necessarily just have somebody accept what you've given them. But the greatest flaw of this method is the lack of control that you actually have on how your message is read. So we're going to have a practical demonstration of why tone and emotional state can be the greatest obstacle that you face. So I'm going to pass you over to James.
Hello. So we just wanted to do a bit of role play here, just using the same email, but actually with seeing Sarah in 3 different emotional states. Basically, the idea is that we want to demonstrate how an email could be interpreted by the recipient depending on their mood. So in the first situation, Sarah is tired of her high maintenance boss and her emotional state is flat.
So I'd just like to put out that I did GCSE drama, so I'm hoping I'm going to pull it out of the bag here. So, hello, Tom. I know you aren't in the office this week, but I need to see you urgently.
So on the second scenario, we want to say that on the way to work this morning, Sarah discovered that she has won £250,000 on the lottery. So her emotional state is ecstatic.
Hello, Tom. I know you aren't in the office this week, but I need to see you urgently.
Well done, Sarah. And on the final scenario, Sarah's just discovered that her super lazy co-worker has been given a £10,000 pay rise. So her emotional state is very, very angry.
Okay, I'm going to try and do facial features as well for this one. Hello, Tom. I know you aren't in the office this week, but I need to see you urgently.
So it's important to remember that no matter how long that you spend to word an email correctly, it depends on the mood of the recipient, on how that might be interpreted by them. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind just going on to the next slide for me, please.
I've been waiting for James to say that. Next slide.
So the next stage that we want to look at is active listening. It needs to show that actually communication is a two-way process, or a two-way street. So for communication to be successful, then you need to actively listen. It's a key aspect of it. So it's important that you listen to what's being said rather than passively hearing the words. So there's sort of 5 strands to this. The first one being paraphrasing, which basically reinforces that you're hearing what is being said to you and you've been able to interpret their view accurately. The next one is asking questions, shows that you're interested in their view and you want to hear what it is that they're saying. The next one is positive body language, demonstrates that you're open and listening to their view. Empathy, how good are you at showing empathy, is likely to be driven by the level of your emotional intelligence. And avoid making a judgment on being reactive. Take your thoughts away so you can consider the next action effectively. And Sarah, I think that's now over to you.
Marvellous. So the benefits of good communication is, so firstly, we're looking at goal congruence. Everyone within the business should be sharing the same goal. How many of you have shared your business plan with your team? Feel like there could be a Mexican wave of hands up here. If you have shared it, how did you communicate it? Did you just share the whole sort of 25-page, 30, 45-page document, or did you use visuals? Then we're looking at the morale and the engagement. So you feel valued within the business when it communicates well to you, and this naturally boosts morale and interest in the business. Then we have good delegation, which relies on good communication skills. Being a good delegator means people are more willing to take work from you, and therefore the right people at the right level are doing the work. and this will naturally increase productivity. There has been an increased appetite from business to set the right culture, not just from a compliance perspective, but also from attracting and retaining talent within your business. A lot of the SRA risk outlooks have covered culture. We've also seen within the disciplinary tribunals, culture playing a part in behaviour that's not becoming within the profession. So culture does play a big part, and communication is key to that. Being able to read non-verbal communication will provide you with an opportunity to diffuse situations. If you're verbally communicating to somebody, you can see if the conversation is taking a nosedive. You can change your tact, you can change your wording. When you've written, put it in writing, you can't change that writing. You can't change tact when you realise that they've actually taken it in a very different context that was meant. So if staff are in conflict, and they're not going to be as productive, so don't avoid difficult conversations. They rarely go away. In my experience, they tend to get worse the longer you leave it. So do nip it in the bud and choose your conversations, choose your method of communication to make sure it's the right one for the type of communication that you're having. I tend to find law firms in particular, that people like to be communicated as to why they're doing something. And for those of you who've studied Maslow's theory, if this need is fulfilled, then there is a much greater chance of job satisfaction, which then leads to staff retention and so forth. So there's lots and lots of benefits. And then finally, going back to goal congruence, it naturally brings, a team together. And that's evidenced really through the pandemic, where we did see exceptional performances by teams that just simply pulled together. And a large proportion of that was because the managers, the business owners were communicating well with them. They all felt part of that team and they all wanted to work together. When we talk about having that sort of common goal, an analogy that I like to use all the time is, if you had, if you've got a football team, you wouldn't put them into a football pitch and not show them where the goal is. You would, show them the goal and everyone knows that that's the direction you're going. Not sharing the objectives of the business. You've basically put, I don't know how many people are in a football team. I'm more rugby myself, but you've got 13, 14, 15 people, however many that is. Everyone, all the footballers are cringing now. How many other people that is? You've put them in a field with no goal and just said run round really fast. So I want you to be motivated and enthusiastic, but you have no common goal. You've got no idea direction that you're going into. So it does build a stronger team. So the pitfalls, we often leave good communication to the bottom of the list, as it only becomes an issue after the ball has been dropped. It's the old saying about being proactive opposed to reactive. You tend to react to things that are happening here and now, rather than investing time and effort into things that are going to yield the results in time to come. Poor communication will impact your whole business and not just one specific area. If your managers are great communicators, this will naturally rub off to the rest of the team. So whether that be with you communicating with your clients, your suppliers, business owners, or other stakeholders, we all have somebody in our team that if we were trying to get discount from a supplier, we all know who we'd ask. If we're looking to diffuse a complaint, we all know who we would ask. And they're because they've got good communication skills. You can respond instantly, but try to give yourself some time to think about what's been asked for you. So if you do have sort of instant messages and you're using that type of communication, do not be afraid to say, thanks for this. Let me get back to you once I've touched base with the rest of the team. Or I appreciate you raising this. I'll get back to you to close of business tomorrow. Don't feel pressurized in saying, yes, you can have tomorrow off, or yes, you can. When you have actually spent time in the evening reflecting on it, you realize that wasn't the right decision to make. The people who are going to ask you questions, if you know they're going to ask you questions, then obviously, take them through it step by step, and don't avoid communicating with them verbally just because it's going to be more time consuming. You change your style to suit them rather than the other way around. And some messages require you to adapt to the situation and require you all, apologies, to get the right result. So don't be afraid to delay if you're in a good headspace. So James, I'll just pass you over to James quickly.
Hi there. So just wanted to have a quick chat around a case study, effectively, that I'm using my own kind of scenario to do this. So just taking you back to the start of COVID, when we were all sort of moving more towards remote working. I know some people were still working in the office, but some were going fully remote. The business that I was working with in decided that actually they would provide Teams application for us to be our main form of communications between staff. So they gave us a sort of 10-minute session on how to use Teams, and then everyone was sort of sent home. And what I found from my perspective was that actually it was another form of communication, another sort of app that I needed to manage. So I was using Teams, email. Our telephone system also had an instant messenger. So quite often when someone might have a client on the phone, I'd be receiving instant messages as well as, as I mentioned, Teams, email. So it's quite difficult to juggle all of those forms of communication. And I think it's kind of key, as Sarah's picked up, that you take time and consider your forms of communication and how that might be interpreted. So in the examples that we provided in terms of if you were given emails, writing messages, how they can be interpreted. So I think that's quite key, what Sarah's picked up during today's session. Sarah, I was just going to have a look just to say that we've had a few comments about how well you did.
I know, I just saw Nancy's comment. Yes, the Oscars are on the way.
But outside of that, we don't have any other questions unless anybody wants to submit one now.
Tell you what would be really, really useful is if people can use the chat feature just to tell us when the pandemic hit. I anticipate most people were email. What did you move over to? So what the sort of things that we did tend to see was on the chat, Teams is obviously quite prevalent here, and Zoom. So I'm just curious, did anyone else sort of move over to WhatsApp, to Messenger? Did they move over to anything sort of Slack or anything a little bit more interesting?
So I think from my perspective, actually, it started with Teams and the instant messenger as well as email. But as time went on, we then actually did move to other forms, so Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp. I think they're the key ones, effectively, when you are communicating by message. It's important that the message is, is going to be interpreted how it should be.
I love Carol's old school phone calls. Brilliant. Great. I think that I'm really intrigued that there are actually some law firms that moved over to Slack. That's really interesting because Slack is very much perceived as a modern, tech, innovative piece of technology. So I'm quietly impressed, to be honest. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So as there's no more questions, we'll pass you back over to Sammy.
Thanks all.
So thank you very much for presenting, guys, and congratulations on your Oscar. And thank you to everyone for joining us. So as a reminder, the slides and a recording of the webinar will be sent over tomorrow. This afternoon, you should receive an email asking to rate us out of 5 stars. If you've enjoyed this webinar, please do leave us some feedback and any suggestions for future topics. So this series of webinars continues on the 22nd of March, where Sarah and James will be back to present a webinar on compliance culture. So thank you for watching and have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.